Welcome, everybody, to History's Calling, Where Will It Take You? We are so excited to have Mr. Wayne Parker, joining us from the City of Provo. Thank you so much, Wayne, for coming and being with us today and talking with our students about what you do and where you've been and the exciting projects that you have going on.
Well, you're welcome. I'm excited to be here today. Thanks.
Well, we were hoping that we could get started by just hearing a little bit about your story, where you started with your undergrad, your master's programs, your work history. Maybe give us a little bio.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, I'll try to be brief. It's a long history, so I'll try to abbreviate. But so at the very beginning, my intent coming into to university studies initially was thinking I wanted to go to law school, and I had I had some interest in political science, and I just loved American history, and fell in love in the history program at BYU with Renaissance and Reformation. I took several classes there just because it intrigued me, and but did a lot with American history, and in between my junior and senior year, again, I was starting to work on law school applications and those kinds of things. I had a minor in political science, and so I took a spring term class called Introduction to Public Administration because I needed the credits, and so the class was basically a case study sort of approach, and so we learned a little bit about principles, but then we would get in and read a case study or watch video and then come back and figure out how the principles applied. And the longer I went in that class, the more excited I got. And I thought, this is way better than being an attorney. And it struck a chord with me. And so I began to look at other options. I looked at recognizing that if I was going to do that, I probably needed to get a graduate degree. And so I looked at public administration programs around the country, also looked at organizational behavior, thinking that those might be really good graduate programs for me, and ended up settling on staying at BYU and doing an MPA through the what's now called the Romney Institute of Ethics and Public Service, I think. But anyway, so I did a 2-year degree, did an internship in Southern California in between my 2 academic years, and got my MPA, and then went to the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and participated in what's now called the Cookingham Fellowship. But it was essentially a 1-year internship where we rotated among 4 key city departments. So the city manager's office, public works, finance, and budget. And so I got a really good broad spectrum, met a lot of great people, my colleagues. There were 4 of us. So my colleagues were from the Maxwell School at Syracuse, the University of Kansas, and University of Michigan. And so anyway, we've been friends now for decades and continue to keep up with each other's careers and so on. And after my year in Kansas City, I started as the city manager in a very small town in Northwest Missouri that had been a kind of a sleepy farming community, but the Corps of Engineers had just come in and did a big flood control project, which opened a huge recreational lake and with 1 million visitors a year into a town of about 2,000 residents. And so I spent 3.5 years there trying to develop economic development strategies and work on issues like traffic and transportation and so on. Left there to go to another suburban Kansas City community in the Shawnee Mission area, and spent about 4 years there as the city manager, and again worked primarily on. This was a city that had a very strong sales tax base. And we had more money than we knew what to do with, which has never happened again in my career. And so we spent a lot of money building flood control projects and upgrading, a lot of the city's infrastructure, and that was exciting. But our families, my wife and I, our families were both in California, and we were hoping to hopscotch back across the country. And so we took a job as the city manager in Roy, Utah, up in Weber County. And our thinking was eventually we'd find our way back to California, and we've never left. And so I spent 5 years in Roy. Then I worked for 2 years in Governor Mike Leavitt's administration as the Deputy State Planning Coordinator and intergovernmental person for the governor's office. And so worked with mostly rural counties and associations of governments. Did the very first strategic planning efforts for the state of Utah back in the day. Spent 2 years in the governor's office, and I totally missed local government. I missed being where the rubber meets the road, and where, you walk into a grocery store and people ask you about, some current city issue, and where the people that you work with, and live with, and so on. And so I went back to the city of Ogden, next door to Roy, as the management services director, and twice as the acting chief administrative officer. And then after 8 years in Ogden, working with 2 mayors, I got recruited to come talk to Provo about coming to work as their chief administrative officer. And I just celebrated the 18th anniversary of my time here, which is almost unprecedented among city managers. We typically don't last 18 years. And so anyway, but we're still having a great experience and love coming to work every day. And so over my career, somebody asked me the other day, I counted up, I'm Mayor Kafusi is my 10th mayor that I've worked with in my career, about 110 city council members over my career, and somewhere north of 1,200 city council meetings over my career. So anyway, it's been fascinating, a lot of fun, and so that's kind of me. My wife and I live in Provo. Our kids are grown and gone now, so we have 13 grandchildren, and our youngest son is in the Coast Guard and getting ready to be deployed to Bahrain next week. Wow. Where he'll spend a year in the escorting tankers in the Persian Gulf. And so, and my oldest son is actually an assistant city manager in a community in Illinois. And so he kind of joined the family business, I guess. But so anyway, so that's just kind of me in a nutshell. So.
Oh my goodness, that's a very large nutshell. So first of all, congratulations on your 18th year. That's pretty amazing to have been in that position for that long and still loving what you do, it sounds
Absolutely. Like. Every day.
That's amazing. Did you ever think that this is where you would be? I mean, obviously you took that one course.
Yeah.
And it changed your kind of career trajectory, but did you ever think that you would stay in this industry for as long as you have?
It's interesting. I've had other opportunities to do things outside of local government, and or in things like League of Cities and Towns or a special service district and those kinds of things. And and I've just always come back to thinking, the one of the great things I love about my career is I see tangible results all the time. And I think about one of the first projects I worked on in Provo was the creation of the Covey Center for the Arts in downtown Provo. And it used to be the city library for many years until they restored Academy Square just before I got to Provo, and moved our city library there now about 20 years ago. And so, but still, when I go to an event at the Covey Center, I still get chills walking into the building, knowing what it used to be, and how it's added to the vibrancy of downtown. It's been one of the key elements to revitalizing what had been essentially a failed downtown 20 years ago, and now to have that and many other things we've done downtown, really create a real sense of place now. And anyway, so I'll go into a Christmas concert in a couple of weeks, and I'll walk in and sit in that auditorium and that we were involved in, helping design and put together and raise the money for, and it's still, super satisfying to know that, I played a role in that, and kind of feel that way. We're, building a new city hall and public safety building now. We have a new airport passenger terminal under construction that'll be open next spring, and you look at all those kinds of things and think, it is so cool to have had a hand in, in some of that growth and development in this community. And And now again, after 18 years, it's home again, after having been a student, undergrad and graduate student. And it's just immensely gratifying to have to see the fruits of your labors.
Yeah.
Not many people get to do that, I don't think so.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. I kind of wanted to step back a little bit and ask you a question, and I apologize. I prepped you for other questions, but I just had so many come up. So I hope it's okay if we're off script a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm curious to know how you feel your history degree prepared you for all of the other steps to get you to where you are.
Yeah. So I think as I look back, and besides just still being as I tell my kids, I'm not a historian, I'm just a history buff. But I think the key things that have really served me through my career that I developed in my history major, I would say is really two things. One is the whole aspect of critical thinking. It's not just taking the facts at face value, but diving deep and understanding context. And I do that all the time in my career. So I told when the prior mayor, John Curtis, came into office, he said, "Tell me about how you interact with city residents." And I said, "Well, almost every resident that comes in to meet with me and shares their view, my first response is, it's a lot more complicated than you think." And so the idea of trying to figure out the context of why things happen the way they do and why decisions get made in the way they do. And my history degree taught me all about figuring out the context, what was happening in the world and in a microcosm of the universe when, decisions got made, or people made certain choices that led them down a given path. And you can't understand the decision process if you don't get the context. The second thing I think really helped me was the writing skills, and in terms of, whether it was papers or the big senior project or those kinds of things, I really learned to write and to write coherently. And then the MPA degree sort of helped me refine that skill into sort of more business writing. But even today, as I sit down and try to do a staff report for a city council meeting or prepare, talking points for the mayor for a given event or something like that, I use the same skills, the same process that I developed when I was an undergraduate. So again, while I still love history and I still love reading about it and listening to it, and we're living in a time when, history is being developed. The people will be writing history books in 20 years about today, the things that we're experiencing today. And so those skills of critical thinking and really coherent writing, have served me basically every day of my career. So.
Thank you so much for answering that. And for those of you who are listening in that are in our geography department, these are similar skills that you learn through your program. So don't feel like this doesn't apply to you, because it does.
Yeah,
you
for
can
sure.
gain these,
Yeah. And we, speaking to the geography students, we do, I spend a fair amount of my day dealing with folks who have your degree. So whether they're in, whether they're in urban planning or part of our GIS team, or whatever role they play, I probably deal more with folks with your skill set than I do with people who have a history background today. And they're a really, really important part of what we do. Local government management really is at its core about geography and planning in general. So yeah, we do a lot of that.
Oh, that's great. So you talked a little bit about, how you moved into public administration, and then you kind of left, I feel like, in order to come back, I guess. Can you talk to us about the value of the skills that you developed that most informed your career path? And then I also talk with students, sometimes I have a lot of students that want to stay in the area.
Mhm.
And so any advice that you might have for them in terms of gaining qualifications here versus maybe somewhere else. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, candidly, let me just say, first of all, those who want to stay, thank you. I remember several years ago, the Kennedy Center at BYU, they put out a magazine, and they have they put a cover on one of their magazines that said basically, get out of Provo to live life. And so we've kind of come back and said, no, that's not exactly how it works, we have I think there are a lot more students who stay in Provo now than they did 40, 50 years ago. And we welcome you. We're thrilled to have you stay as part of our long-term community. But so leaving for me really was about the opportunity to go to Kansas City. I saw it as, it's a very exclusive program. I was the first ever BYU MPA to be accepted into the program in Kansas City. And so in part it was, to get me in circles with people who were, at the pinnacle of their careers in local government management. And so I worked with some extraordinarily bright, talented people, and several of my peers or the folks who were in the program before or after me, the city manager in Denton, Texas was one of my colleagues, and Ann Arbor, Michigan, and many others who kind of came through that program. And so it was an extraordinarily important role. And I think I was the lowest paid MPA graduate that year because I saw this as an investment in my career. And again, as we finally found our way back to Provo, eventually, a lot of coming back to Provo was about my experience at BYU. It wasn't where I grew up. I grew up in Northern California, but it was where I first started getting engaged in local issues, and being able to come back to a city that had so many challenges in front of it, and just so many assets that were not fully developed for the residents of Provo. And so it was really all about trying to come back to what my sort of adopted hometown and try to make a positive difference. And I remember going to a Chamber of Commerce meeting up at Sundance. It's been several years ago, but it was right after the rooftop concert series had sort of taken off, and we'd had a rooftop concert that wasn't on the rooftop anymore, but featured a very well-known DJ who came and did a concert that evening, and we had 25,000 people in downtown Provo that night for the concert. And so I took some video of that event and did this presentation with the Chamber of Commerce board. And my whole theme was, it ain't your grandpa's Provo anymore. And so we talked about Cascade and the rooftop concert series and the music scene with Imagine Dragons, the national parks, coming out of the Provo music scene, and just had a really good experience about talking about how Provo has grown and developed and matured. And it's matured in a really interesting way, very different than other cities, that are about Provo's age. And with the younger, a young demographic and kind of a fun vibe, we kind of walked through the process over the last 20 years of trying to revitalize downtown Provo. And it's really cool. We decided our measure of vibrancy in downtown Provo would be if people around the valley said, it's Friday night, we don't know what we're going to do, but if we go to downtown Provo, we'll find something fun to do. And I think it's become that. And that's, we've hit that very lofty goal of having it be a destination, and, 53 restaurants within, 4 blocks of the intersection of University Avenue and Center Street, and, just a vibrant residential community. We just had a condominium in downtown Provo, 1,500 square foot condominium, sell for $1 million. So that suggests something's happening here that people are getting excited about. So
that's awesome. I love hearing the excitement that you have for all these things.
Yeah,
so great.
real excited.
So you've talked a little bit about different experiential learning opportunities that you had on this career path that has been so instrumental to where you are. Can you tell us a little bit about the value of experiential learning, internships, volunteerism, and then how you feel that qualifies students for post-graduation opportunities?
Yeah, that's great. So, I get to talk to lots of young professionals in my organization and others. And so, when I did my internship in Southern California in between my 2 years of graduate school, I discovered there was a whole world of local government that I hadn't heard anything about. And that was really the sort of public works, engineering, how do you deliver safe and clean water? How do you safely and environmentally sensitively get waste out of homes? Whether that's what you flush when you flush or what you put in your garbage can. And I came back from that experience and said, boy, there's a lot I don't know. And so, fortunately, I had several elective options still available. And so I actually petitioned the department to be able to go take some engineering and public works management classes in the College of Engineering as part of my graduate program. And so again, so one of the things I think you discover with the internship or the experiential learning is what you're lacking. You refine your skills that you've developed, but you also figure out kind of what's missing in your career path. And so again, whether that's a volunteer or internships that we do here in Provo or other places, I think one of the values is to figure out what you're missing, and it's also to have the opportunity to build your portfolio. And again, we don't typically think about portfolio in the public sector, but much like an artist, who develops a portfolio of work, you'll have the opportunity to craft staff reports or do some research or staff an interdisciplinary committee. And again, all of those things contribute to the portfolio, which again gives you something when you go for a job interview or you make an application for a job that you can say, yeah, I'm just a year out of school, but here's what I did. And I love what the MPA program at BYU has now done, a program they call Grantwell, which is essentially a consulting firm that consists of faculty and students in the Romney Institute. And they'll go out to a small town and develop an economic development strategy. And so every one of those students comes back and says, yeah, I was on a consulting team that wrote an economic development strategy for Santaquin, Utah, or wherever. And now you've got some stuff you put on your resume that even though they'll look and say, man, you just got your degree a year ago, man, you've done a ton of stuff. And I think those are, that to me is the beauty of the experiential learning, not just that you had an opportunity to do something, but that you now can leverage that to move forward in the next step of a career.
Speaking of experiential learning, does the City of Provo have opportunities for students with various backgrounds to come and see what it's like to work for that municipality?
Yeah, we do. Most of our departments have intern opportunities. Most are paid, some are not, but yeah, we do a lot of that. So I think engineering, we've probably moved quite a few engineering interns through our operation. We have a graduate student intern program here in my office. And again, we're typically looking for somebody who's got a year of graduate school kind of under their belt. And we've done some really cool things. When we brought Google Fiber to Provo, one of the advantages we had was that Google Fiber allowed us to designate 25 community organizations that would get the free gig service and in their building, and it would stay free in perpetuity. And so it was a very intensely competitive process for some of our local nonprofits and service providers to engage. And so that year, our intern managed the selection process. So we had every organization prepare a video and talk about their plans for utilizing this resource. We also created a number of years ago, using our intern, created an internal innovation fund. And so we fund about $250,000 a year, and we let individual city departments come in and pitch something innovative they want to do. And we've done some really cool stuff. Those who've maybe worked in our Parks and Rec department, and we hire hundreds of BYU students and others every year as seasonal employees, or lifeguards or other things. But we now, all of our fields in Provo are striped by robot. And so we no longer have to walk the little chalk thing down the line, and we load up water soluble paint inside this robot, and we push a button and it stripes the entire athletic field, soccer field, baseball field, whatever it is. And that came out of our innovation fund. We worked with a vendor who was trying to figure out how to perfect this technology, and the city was kind of the guinea pig. And at the end of the day, we got something that saves us a ton of money and a ton of staff time. And so now we're into robotics. But that whole program was researched and created by a graduate intern. So yeah, so they're and again, Parks and Rec also has interns, and the energy department we run our own power service, and so we've brought budding electrical engineers and finance people in to help us with rate analysis and a variety of things. So again, yeah, we look for opportunities for sure to leverage our very capable student population to do good things for us.
That's remarkable. That innovation fund sounds amazing.
It's been a ton of fun, and our city council loves it. And so every year we just put another $250,000 in the budget this year to take another round. So yeah, they do love the opportunity to fund ideas that improve service, save money. And we've probably done about 40 projects like the robot, in the last several years. So
it'd be so fun to sit on that city Shark Tank.
That's right.
It sounds like, right?
It is a little bit Shark Tanky. So yeah, we typically bring, we've had some folks from BYU and UVU on our selection committee, and we typically bring a young entrepreneur startup executive into that group too, and kind of try to rotate that around. But yeah, it seems a little Shark Tanky when we're in the midst of the presentation. So
that sounds to me like you get to wear a lot of different hats in the role that you operate in. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about what your role looks like and all the different things? I mean, we don't have a lot of time before questions, but maybe give us some of your favorites.
Yeah. So again, I apologize for telling stories. My communications director keeps telling me storytelling is the answer. So, but I had, so when Mayor Curtis left office and ran for Congress, and he sort of brought some parting gifts, and I have sitting in my office just off the side of my desk here the parting gift from Mayor Curtis, and it is an antique spyglass that sits on a walnut tripod. And he said, "Wayne, I want you to put this in your office where you'll trip on it every day, because every time you trip on it, I want you to think, am I looking out 25 years or am I just stuck in the day?" And so we've done, one of the things I love most about my job is the opportunity to be strategic. The organization's big enough and capable enough that I don't have to do a whole ton of the day-to-day stuff. I mean, I still review contracts and I sit in tons of meetings. But I also have the opportunity about every other week to take half a day, and I leave the building, and sometimes I'll go for a walk. Sometimes I'll go to the library. Sometimes I'll hide out in another city facility somewhere at Public Works or Energy. And I will pick one topic and try to think about it 25 years out. And so that idea of trying to get our organization to think more strategically is a really big deal. But the other thing I think I just mentioned is, I've used I've tried to figure out what's my elevator speech, when somebody says, "Well, what do you do?" And you've got 3 floors in the elevator, how do you describe it? And at the end of the day, I think I finally come down to say, well, so my job is probably misnamed, because what I really feel like I am is the Chief Quality of Life Officer for Provo. And it's really my job to ensure that the services we deliver, the innovations we do, the buildings and parks and rec centers and ice arenas and all those things that we build really are about improving the quality of life in the community. And so if we're doing something that doesn't get us there, we shouldn't be doing it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's really all about developing a really strong quality of life for the residents of Provo. So
I love that. Who do we need to talk to make that official change to your title? Right?
Yeah, maybe
That's
one of these
wonderful.
days.
That's wonderful. Well, as we're wrapping up, do you have any other advice for our undergraduate history and or geography students as they seek similar opportunities?
Yeah. So again, there were moments in my undergraduate history career where I thought about law school, and I thought, maybe I just love this enough. I should just teach, right? I should just be a history teacher. The good news is that, again, because I use so many of the skills I developed back then, in many ways, I feel like I get to teach already. And sometimes it's teaching history, and sometimes it's teaching, political stuff, and sometimes it's teaching engineering or planning or whatever. But and a lot of times it's teaching effective management and supervision. So I still get to teach, and that's a good thing. But yeah, I would just try to find, again, I know it sounds trite, but figure out what you're passionate about, and then let's see if we can find a career path that lets you do what you're passionate about. And, as you suggested, Lindsay, I still feel passionate every day about what I'm doing, and still love the job. And even though there are hard moments, and sometimes you have to make hard decisions and take some political risks and so on to try to do the right thing. And, in my role, try to get our organization at the point where it's, where it can be truly successful. And I think in large measure we are. There's still some things we got to improve, but yeah. So I love that I wake up every morning and am excited to go to work. I jump out of bed at 5:45, and because we work 410s in Provo, so I work 7 to 6 every day, 4 days a week, and lots of times I get involved in meetings or other discussions on Fridays. But yeah, I still pop out of bed, 5:45 in the morning, so I can be in the office at 7. And yeah, it's still life's good from a career standpoint. It's been awesome.
That's awesome, and I can feel that energy. You exude that energy. I can tell that's not just something that you're saying, that is actually very true. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences. We have some time now for questions. So for those of you who are on this call, please feel free to ask some questions, and we'll go ahead and take that time.
Okay, so we do have a few questions. One question is from Stuart Anderson. He asks, history majors learn to analyze primary source documents. Do you get to apply the skills you learned as an undergraduate when looking at the documents that come across your desk in public administration?
Yeah, for sure. And again, I talked just a little bit about this idea of critical thinking, and when a document, and a lot of the ones I review are just contracts, but I also look at staff reports that are getting ready to go to the city council, and again, I'm pretty ruthless about making sure the grammar is correct, and the context is right, and the content is accurate, and so I, not unlike a history professor, I probably bleed red over lots and lots of documents that I send back for revision. And yeah, I think again, those critical thinking and critical writing skills still are part of my everyday life, and again, those had their foundation. They got polished in the master's program, but they clearly had their foundation in writing for some very tough history professors back in my day. So I still remember one, a guy named Phil Flammer, who probably nobody in the history department still remembers, but he taught military history, and it was absolutely fascinating. But I'll tell you what, I had to write well, because I was not going to get a grade if I didn't write well. It would just get kicked back and read all over. And guys like Dr. Flammer taught me through the school of difficulties how that works. So I hope that answers Stuart's question.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just wondering, do you see many history majors working for the city right now, or are most of the history majors, have they gone on and got the graduate degrees and then they've come back and worked in different areas? Or do you see a certain amount of history people in certain departments or areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my guess is that those who were history majors who work for the city have probably gone on and gotten advanced degrees. So my guess is, if I were to look at the legal department, for example, probably a good share of those folks had history or political science minors, and then moved through law school. I think I'm trying to think if there would be, sometimes, we'll hire like a policy analyst who will work for the city council, who maybe would have an undergraduate degree in history with maybe a minor in, the new BYU civic engagement minor, or one of those kinds of things that would still bring a really strong skill set to us. But my supposition is, again, because the city really is a conglomerate of 16 different business units, everybody is kind of has their own requirements, for moving in and up the organization. So yeah, it's probably a little difficult to think about that. I suspect, there could be some who would have, ended up, again, probably with a graduate degree, but might end up in our library, who, does a lot of our, kind of historical work in Provo. So yeah, those would probably be the only ones I could think of off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you. And it doesn't look like I have any more questions, so that is it for questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Arnie, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask from a career advisor standpoint, career coaching? I think you went on mute and then off mute and then on mute again. Maybe type it.
I have to tell you, last year we had a virtual city council Christmas party, and the gift that was given was a mug, and on one side it says the Provo City Council logo, and the other side it says, "Hey, you're on mute." And
yes. Yes.
so yeah, that's a whole new terminology in the last 18 months.
It's an inside joke, I'm sure, for a lot of different people.
For sure.
Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. So thank you so much, Wayne, for coming and speaking with us about your incredible career, and for all the advice that you have for our students as they are pursuing similar opportunities. We're so excited to be part of the City of Provo and to be here watching all these really remarkable things that are happening. Thank you for all of your hard work and for what you do to make that possible for our residents.
We have a wonderful team. We have very forward-looking elected officials, and it's just all the tools are in place for Provo to continue to grow and improve and become even better than it is today. So thanks again. Thanks for being part of our community.
Well, thank you everybody for coming today, and this concludes our webinar.